Taro Min had not felt anything in a very long time. Not from the whiskey, not from the power, not from the particular satisfaction of a room that fell silent the moment he walked into it, which every room always did. He had spent 20 years constructing himself into something nothing could reach. Then she walked in carrying a silver tray. She was catering staff. She was supposed to be invisible. She had been invisible to every other person in that grand hall for the previous 90 minutes. He saw her the moment she entered. He could not explain it then. He would not try to explain it later. Some things do not arrive with reasons. They simply arrive. For the next hour, without speaking a single word to her, without making one visible move in her direction, Taro Min watched Kesa Dalo move through his gathering and felt something so foreign he had to search 20 years back to find its name. He felt alive. And then a woman's voice crossed the room, light, deliberate, wrapped in a smile. 2 words said between sips like they cost her nothing. She's fat. The room did not erupt. The room did something far more devastating. It went completely, perfectly, suffocatingly still. Every head in that hall turned, not toward the woman who had spoken, toward him. Because in a room full of people who had spent years learning how to read Taro Min in order to survive him, something had just happened that was not supposed to be possible. They had seen him flinch. One breath. He collected himself back into the man they knew. He set his glass down. The sound of crystal on marble moved through the silence of that hall like a stone dropped into still water. Slow, deliberate, reaching every corner, and then he spoke. Not loud, never loud. In a room that quiet, a man like Taro Min did not need volume. Volume was for people who were not certain they would be obeyed. She's mine. 2 words, quiet as a door closing, final as a verdict. And every single person in that hall felt the ground shift beneath them. Nobody laughed, nobody moved, nobody looked at the woman in the red dress. Every eye stayed on Taro Min as he calmly picked up his glass and turned back to his associates and resumed his conversation, as though he had simply made a small correction, as though that was all it was. Kesa Dalo stood in the middle of that room and felt the most inconvenient, most dangerous, most completely unplanned thing she had felt in 3 years of building walls around herself. She felt something. For a woman who had promised herself she would feel nothing tonight, that single fact was the most terrifying thing that had happened in this building. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Not Taro, not the woman in the red dress, not the 50 witnesses carrying this story to every corner of Seoul. The woman he had just claimed in front of everyone he commanded had not come to that gathering to fall in love. She had come to bring him down. 3 years of hunting. 3 years of following the trail of the man who destroyed her father across 3 countries and 1 ocean. 3 years of building the kind of patience that only grief can build. All of it leading here, to this room, to this night, to this plan. And now she had a problem she had not prepared for. The man she had spent 3 years preparing to expose was the first man in all of those 3 years who had made her feel something worth protecting, and tonight had only just begun. Come back with me, back to the beginning of this night, back to everything already moving beneath the surface of that beautiful, dangerous room before a single word was spoken. Because this is not just a story about 2 words that silenced a room. This is a love story built on a secret. And secrets, in a world like this one, do not stay buried. They surface, and when they do, they change everything. 3 hours before those 2 words changed everything, Kesa Dalo stood in her bathroom in a small Seoul apartment and made herself a promise. She pressed both palms flat against the cold mirror glass. She looked at herself the way you look at someone you are giving instructions to. Feel nothing. Remember why you are here. Do what you came to do. Come home. Her father's name was Daro. He had been a careful man, a decent man who believed that doing things right meant the truth would eventually protect you. He had been catastrophically wrong. He had found something he was not supposed to find. and the people who needed him silent had burned his name to ash and waited. He died 18 months later, not from violence, from the weight of a name that had been made into something shameful by people who were never going to face a consequence for it, unless Kesa found the evidence first. 3 years of building a trail across 3 countries had led her here, to Seoul. To a gathering she had spent 11 weeks earning the right to enter. She had a plan, she had a promise, she had a copper bracelet engraved with 4 words her mother had chosen. What is yours will find you. She walked into that building believing that meant justice. This gathering had been his father's before it became his. Most things in Taro Min's life had followed that same transfer. Power handed down the way debt is handed down, not as a gift, as an obligation that arrives already overdue. He had attended this gathering for the first time at 18, seated at his father's left hand, learning what the silence between these men meant. Not absence of conversation, architecture, the hierarchy visible in who sat nearest the head of the table, who poured drinks for superiors before themselves, who did not speak until the person above them had finished. He had been paying attention ever since. 20 years later, he was the center of the room. Taro Min stood beside him, as he always stood, the way a very old, very loyal shadow stands. "Clean evening," Daro said. "Not yet," Taro replied. He could not have explained in that moment why he said it. He would understand later. It happened 40 minutes into the gathering. Taro was in conversation with a man from Busan whose handshake had been too firm, which always meant something was being hidden. He was half listening, half cataloging the room, reading temperatures, tracking alliances. He was not watching the service door when it opened. Something made him look anyway. She was performing invisibility. He could see that immediately. The practiced warmth, the neutral expression, the specific way she moved through a room full of power without engaging any of it. And it was precisely that kind of performance, done at that level, that was to a man trained to see what was not being shown. The most interesting thing in the building. He excused himself from the Busan conversation in 2 words. He repositioned himself to a better sightline. For the next hour, without speaking to her once, he watched. And what he found underneath the performance was a woman running an operation inside his operation with a precision that was, against every rational thought he had, breathtaking. He tilted his glass to hide the fact that for the first time in a very long time, Taro Min was smiling. The natural lull came at the 90-minute mark. Suki Han had been waiting for it. She spoke into it with the precision of someone who had been aiming for a very long time. 2 words, wrapped in a smile, directed at the woman with the tray who had been receiving a kind of invisible attention that Suki Han had decided she could not allow to continue. The words landed. The room sealed itself in silence. Every head turned, not toward Suki, not toward the woman with the tray, toward him. And then the sound that cut through everything. Right now, everyone watching this story from wherever you are in the world, I need you to drop your country in the comments. Because this moment, a room full of power choosing silence while one person is humiliated, is something that lands everywhere. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Taro Min crossed the room in the silence. Not fast, not dramatic. The way a man moves when a decision has already been made and performance is not required. He stopped at a position close enough to make his meaning clear to everyone present. His voice, quiet as a closed door, final as a verdict. "She's mine." And the world inside that room rearranged itself around 2 words. She did not move for 4 full seconds. Then she made herself move, walked the tray to the nearest table, set it down, turned to go back to the service area. Her pulse was running its own separate agenda from the rest of her, and she needed distance. Then his voice, closer. "Are you all right?" She turned, close enough to speak without being overheard, though the room was watching regardless. Close enough to discover that his eyes were not cold at all. They were present in a way she had not prepared herself for. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. "I asked how you were, not for a report." She almost laughed. She had not laughed in 4 weeks. The fact that her body tried to do it now, in this room, with this man, shook her more than anything else that had happened tonight. "Why did you do that?" She asked the real question instead of the safe one. He considered her for a moment. "Because it needed to be done." "You don't know me." "No." He picked up the glass she had just set down. He turned it once in his fingers and placed it back precisely where it had been. "But I intend to." He walked back into the room before she could respond. Back to 50 witnesses. Back to the role he had worn his entire adult life. Posture unchanged, expression unchanged. Everything underneath it entirely different. Kesa stood there for 10 seconds too long. Then she straightened her jacket, lifted a fresh tray, and walked back into the room. Her hands were perfectly steady. Her mind was not even close. Over the next 90 minutes, they did not speak again, but something grew in the space between them that neither of them had agreed to and neither of them could stop. She noticed it first in the room's geography. Wherever she needed to move, people shifted. The path opened, not visibly, not dramatically, just enough. She understood eventually what it meant. He was watching. And in a room where every person deferred to Taro Min in everything, his attention had become her invisible protection. She told herself this was a complication, that being seen in this room was the opposite of what the mission required. What she could not tell herself was that the warmth of it was not real. She had spent 3 years making sure she would not need anyone. She had been extraordinarily disciplined about it. Taro Min was the first crack in 3 years of discipline. 4 times that evening, she found herself positioned close enough to hear his voice. She told herself each time that this was operational, that proximity to Taro Min was why she was here. She was not convincing herself. Near the end of the dinner hour, he was alone at the window. She had not planned to go to him. She told herself that 3 times while she was already moving. She stopped beside him. Not too close. She did not speak. He did not speak. For 30 seconds they stood side by side, looking at Seoul at night through the floor-to-ceiling glass, and the silence between them was the most intimate thing that had happened in that building all evening. He said, without looking at her, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Not a question. An offering. "Yes," she said, and meant 4 different things at once. "Before you hear what happens next, tell me something." After everything Suki-han did tonight, the calculation of it, the smile, the specific cruelty of a woman who weaponized another person's body in a room full of witnesses, what do you think of someone like that? Drop your honest reaction in the comments below. They stayed at that window for 4 minutes. It was the longest 4 minutes of her mission. When she finally moved away, she had to remind herself 3 times what she had come to Seoul to do. The window opened at 11:47. She had calculated it would come between 11:30 and midnight when the gathering shifted to late drinks and the building's movement became fluid enough for catering staff to have legitimate reason anywhere in the upper corridors. 11 minutes. She was inside the document room in 40 seconds, phone out, hands moving with the calm efficiency of muscle memory. Then it vibrated, silently. "Kemi, I need to tell you something." Kemi's voice was low and careful, the voice she used when she had been sitting on something difficult and had finally chosen to say it. "About the signature on the document. I'm looking right now." "Kesa." A pause. The pause that chooses between gentle and direct and picks direct. "The signature is not Taro Min's. I confirmed it this afternoon. It belongs to an older member of his organization." Kesa's hand stopped moving in the drawer. "What name?" Kemi told her. She put her free hand flat on the desk surface. The wood was cold. The name was not the one she had been hunting for 3 years. It was worse. She found the document 3 minutes later. Second file drawer, 3rd page, a signature at the bottom in the confident, slightly compressed handwriting of someone who has signed many documents and expects each one to be followed. Daro Min, not Taro. Not the man who had stood at that window with her 40 minutes ago and offered her a city like something he trusted her with. his most trusted lieutenant, the closest thing in his organization to a father, the person who had burned her father's name and walked away without a single scar. She replaced the file, locked the room, walked back toward the gathering below. With every step, she rebuilt what she understood about this night. Taro Min had not destroyed her father, but Taro Min's world had. And Daro Min, who had been in that hall all evening, who had watched her twice with an expression she could not name, had known from the moment she walked in exactly who she was. She was certain of it now. She straightened her jacket and went back to work. Near the end of the gathering, the room had thinned to its quieter half. Taro found her near the eastern tables, collecting the last cleared glasses. "You're moving differently," he said. She looked at him. "Excuse me? 2 hours ago, you moved like someone counting exits. Now you're moving like someone who found what they came for." Not an accusation. A clean observation from a man who had been watching her more carefully than she had realized. He was too precise. He saw too much. "I found the glasses," she said. "That's all." And then he smiled. A real one. Brief and small and completely different from the controlled face he had worn all night. It changed everything about him, made him reachable, made him human. Let me stop here for one moment, because the fury I want you to feel right now is not just at Suki-han, it is at every room in the world that has ever gone quiet while one person was being made small inside it. Have you ever been that person, or watched it happen? Say it in the comments. Because silence is how cruelty survives, and tonight we are not being silent. "What if I'm not extending anything?" he said quietly. "What if I'm beginning something?" She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, and then, from across the room, she saw what she had been missing all evening. Taro Min was watching, and the expression on his face was not curiosity. It was a man deciding what to do about a problem that had just become urgent. She was halfway to the service area when he said her name, not her uniform, not, "Excuse me," her name, precisely and without hesitation. He was waiting at the second door, hands in his pockets, body relaxed in the way of very controlled people who have decided to appear unthreatening before asking for something significant. She made her face the professional face, the neutral look-through-me face. He was not looking through it. "I thought it was you from the moment you walked in. Your father had your eyes." Her heart stopped, started, faster. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." One step closer, just enough to keep their words beneath the noise of the event beyond the wall. "Your father was a good man. I believed that then. I believe it now." "Then why did you sign the document?" Something moved across his face, old and heavy. "Because I was protecting someone who did not know they needed protecting. Your father found the same thing you found tonight. He was going to take it somewhere that would have destroyed the person I was protecting." He looked toward the closed door. The muffled sound of the gathering beyond, she understood. "The fury I want you to feel right now is cold. What Taro Min chose to protect and whose name he chose to burn to protect it says everything. Drop your reaction in the comments. I need to read it." "If you move forward," he said, his voice quiet, "the document will surface in a way that ties Taro's name to the organization by association. He had nothing to do with what I did, but the people this reaches will not draw that distinction." He looked at her directly. "So I am asking you, not telling, asking. What matters more to you right now? Your father's name, or his?" He left her there. "Before we hear what she decides, I need you to do something. Tell me right now in the comments what you think Kesa is going to choose. Will she protect Taro, or will she finish what 3 years of her life have been building toward? Comment right now, because what she does next is not what you expect." 4 minutes and 20 seconds, she counted. It was what she did when she needed to exist somewhere outside herself. She thought about her father, about the last visit, 2 months before he died. He had been sitting in his garden, holding her hand and looking at the sky. At one point, almost to himself, he had said, "The truth has its own timing, Kesa. You cannot hurry it. You can only decide whether you want to be standing in the right place when it arrives. She thought about Taro Min, about the sound of crystal on marble crossing a room, about 30 seconds at a window that had cost her more of herself than 3 years of everything else combined. He had not known her name. He had not owed her anything. He had done it anyway. She could walk out. She had the document. She had the name. She could complete 3 years of work and let what followed follow. Or she could go to him, as herself, with the truth, with everything. Her eyes opened. She pushed off the wall and went to find him. He turned when she came back into the room. Before he organized his expression into something more controlled, she saw it. He had been watching the door. She was not carrying a tray, not performing anything, just Kesa, walking toward him like she meant it. "I need to show you something," she said. He led her to the small private alcove. He closed the door. She took out her phone, pulled up the document photograph, and held it out without a single word of explanation. She watched his face while he read it. She had expected anger, the cold, closed fury she had read about in 3 years of research. His face went quiet instead, not the controlled quiet of the gathering, something private, something belonging to a much younger version of himself. "Where did you find this?" "Third corridor, second door on the right." He looked at her. "Who are you?" She told him, her father's name, what he found, what happened after. The trail across 3 countries to this room in this building, wearing a black uniform and carrying a silver tray. He listened without interrupting, without looking away from her face once. When she finished, the silence between them was unlike anything in that building all evening. Not dangerous, not performing. 2 people standing in the same truth for the first time. If this story is doing what I think it is doing to your heart right now, this is the moment to subscribe. Hit that button, turn on notifications, because where part 2 takes this will not leave you quickly. "Your father's name," he said. "Bram Dalo." She went completely still. "You know it?" He looked at the document, then back at her. "My father mentioned it once. I was 19 years old. I was not supposed to be in the room." He placed the phone down carefully between them, as though it were something breakable. "I have carried the sound of that name for 20 years without knowing what it meant." She sat down across from him. The last sounds of the gathering faded through the closed door. The Seoul city lights came through the high window above them. 2 people who had arrived at the same point from completely opposite directions, carrying the same name between them for 20 years without knowing it. In that silence, Kesa became aware of something she had no category for. She had come to find justice. She had found it, but she had also found something that was not going to resolve itself neatly or quietly or on any schedule she could plan for. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "About the document?" "About all of it." She looked at the copper bracelet on her wrist, her mother's inscription. "What is yours will find you." "I don't know yet," she said. He nodded once, slowly, like that was the most honest answer he had received in years. "Then come back," he said, "when you do. If this story moved something real in you tonight, share it right now. Share it with the person who needs to believe that something true can find you even when you built yourself walls to keep it out." She left the building at 1:43 in the morning. 2 blocks away in the back of a car, she pressed her copper bracelet to her lips for one long moment. Behind her, in the empty gathering hall, Taro Min sat alone at the long black marble table. In front of him, the document. Beside it, a card she had left without telling him. He turned it over. On the back, clean handwriting. "There is more. When you are ready. K." He sat with that card for a very long time. Part 2 is coming. And the truth about Taro Min's father, the secret connecting 2 families across 20 years and 2 continents, is something neither Kesa nor you saw coming. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. And do not let this story go without telling someone. If this story pulled you in, you already know this is where you belong. More stories like this drop here every single day. Don't miss the next one.